Everyone moves to Palmdale thinking they're going to save tons of money. And honestly, when you first start looking at homes out there, it really does feel that way. Especially if you're coming from Los Angeles or even from the San Fernando Valley, where prices are significantly higher and a lot of buyers come out here for the first time. And almost immediately, they notice the difference. They're seeing larger homes, they're seeing more bedrooms, actual backyards, sometimes even newer construction, all within a price range that would barely get them into a condo in other parts of LA. And naturally, that makes the move feel like a no-brainer at the beginning. And I've seen this happen so many times with clients where within the first day of touring homes, they're already saying things like, wait, I didn't know we could get this much for our budget. And you can actually see that shift happen in how they're thinking about the move. But what I've always seen, and this is a part that doesn't always get talked out loud, is that while the home's price is lower, that's really just one piece of the overall picture. And it's usually not the part that ends up surprising people the most. Because what tends to catch people off guard is this. It's not what they see when they're touring homes. It's not what they feel once they're living here day to day. It's the monthly cost that doesn't show up on a listing. It's the lifestyle adjustment that don't come up during the showing, right? And it's the things you don't really think about until they become part of your routine. I have clients who felt completely confident at the beginning. They thought they had it all figured out financially. They were even excited about the home, the space, the upgrade, and then a few months after they move in, once everything settles in, they start realizing that their total cost of living felt very different than what they had originally expected. Not necessarily worse, just different. And that difference matters because when you're making a move like this, it's not just what looks good on paper. It's about how it actually feels once you're living every single day. And that's really the goal here, not just to show you that Palmdale is more affordable, but to help you understand whether it's the right kind of affordability for your lifestyle. Because for some people, this move is one of the best decisions they made. They get more space, they get more comfort, they get a better home, even the environment, and it fits perfectly with how they live. And for others, they are parts of it, they don't fully think it through. And that's where the experience starts to feel a little different than they expected. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the real cost of living in Palmdale. Not what it costs to buy a home, but what it actually feels like financially once you're living here. So you can make that decision for yourself that actually makes sense for you long term. I'm Jennifer Espinoza with Casa Espinoza Homes, and I help people relocate to Palmdale, Lancaster, and the Antelope Valley. And real quick, if you are thinking about moving here, make sure you subscribe, follow, comment, like, because I break all this down so you can make the best decision possible for you. And this is exactly the kind of conversation I have with my clients before they decide to make the move. So let's start with the part that everyone focuses on first, the home price. Because this is usually the reason people even consider moving to Palmdale in the first place. It's the first thing that grabs your attention, and honestly, it's what gets people excited. When buyers from Los Angeles or the San Fernando Valley, they start looking out here, the difference is immediate. They're used to seeing smaller condos, townhomes, limited space, and then they come out to Palmdale, and suddenly they're looking at full single-family homes, multiple bedrooms, a backyard, sometimes even newer construction, all within the same budget they were already planning for. And that shift alone is what makes a lot of people feel like they found a better opportunity, because it feels like they're upgrading their lifestyle without necessarily increasing what they're spending. And in many cases, that part is true. But when I see people starting to get a little too comfortable is when they assume that because a home price is lower, everything else is automatically going to be lowered too. And that's where the disconnect usually begins, because the purchase price is just one part, but the overall cost of living, and while it might feel like you're saving money up front, that doesn't always translate the same way once you factor in everything that comes with owning and living in that home. I worked with buyers who came into the process thinking, if I can get a bigger house for less, then this is an easy decision. And at that stage, it does make totally sense. But once we actually sit down and go through the full numbers together, including taxes, utilities, commuting, and everything else along the way, that's when they start to realize that that financial picture is a lot more layered than they originally thought. And something else I always want to remind my clients is that when you move into a larger home, your expenses don't just stay the same. You're often maintaining more space, sometimes spending more on upkeep, and even the way you use your home day to day can shift, which all plays into your overall cost of living. So yes, the home price in Palmdale absolutely gives you more value and more space compared to Los Angeles, but they don't tell you the full story of what it actually costs to live here once everything else is factored in. One of the biggest things I see buyers overlook early on is property taxes and Mello Roos, especially when they start looking at newer homes, which is very popular here in Palmdale. A lot of the newer communities are beautifully built. They're modern, move-in ready, and naturally, that's what a lot of buyers are drawn to at the beginning. But what isn't always obvious upfront is that many of these homes come with additional taxes that can get added onto your monthly payment. And this is where things start to shift a little bit, because on the surface, the home price does look great. If it fits the budget, if it feels manageable, if it feels like everything is lining up. But once you factor in those extra costs, your monthly payments can increase by a few $100s, depending on the specific area and the property. And that's usually the moment where buyers start to see things differently. I have buyers get really excited about a home based on the list price. And then once we actually sit down and run the full numbers together, including taxes and everything else, they're surprised to see how much that payment actually can change. And again, it doesn't mean those homes aren't worth it. For a lot of people, they absolutely are. You're getting newer construction, updated layouts, a certain lifestyle that comes with that. But it's important to understand exactly what you're committing to financially before you make that decision. Because once those costs are built into your payment, that becomes part of your everyday reality. And that's where planning ahead really makes a difference. And honestly, this is the kind of stuff most people don't find out here until after they already made the move. Another part of the cost of living that doesn't get talked about enough is utilities. And this is something that tends to catch people off guard, especially if they're coming from Los Angeles or areas with milder weather, because Palmdale has a very different climate. And during the summer months, temperatures can easily reach 100 degrees or even more. And it's not just a couple of hot days here and there, it's constant heat, day after day. And that changes how you live in your home on a daily basis. Because of that, your air conditioning is going to be running, and a lot more than you might be used to sometimes throughout most of the day, especially during peak hours. And naturally, that has a direct impact on your electricity bill. I had clients tell me they really noticed after moving in, not when they were touring homes, not when they were running numbers, but once they were actually living here, going through a full summer, that's when it really hit them. And I always tell people this. It's not just about one high bill. It's about consistency, because when you're running your AC day after day during the summer, that becomes part of your normal monthly expenses, not just something occasionally. And again, it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker for most people, but it is something you want to be aware of ahead of time, because it's one of those everyday costs that adds up over time. Now let's talk about what is probably the biggest trade-off when it comes to living in Palmdale, and that's the commute. especially for anyone who's still working in Los Angeles or the surrounding areas. This is something that can seem manageable at first when you're just thinking about it, but it feels different once it becomes part of your daily routine, because you're not just paying for gas, you're also committing your time every single day. And depending on where you work, that drive can easily turn into an hour, sometimes even more, each way. And while that might not sound so bad when you're first planning things out, it starts to add up quickly. Once you're doing it consistently throughout the day, I had conversations with buyers who initially felt like the trade-off was completely worth it. They were excited about getting more space, a bigger home, a better environment for their family. And in the beginning, that excitement makes it feel so easy. But after experiencing the commute for a while, they start to realize it has a bigger impact on their lifestyle than they expected. Not just financially, but mentally too. At the same time, I've also worked with clients who are completely fine with it, especially if they work hybrid schedules, work from home part of the week, or simply prioritize having more space or being closer to the city. And one thing I always recommend is actually testing the commute before you commit, because it's very different to experience it in real time versus just estimating your commute. And that alone can help you decide if that's something you can realistically maintain long term. So it really comes down to this: what matters more to you? Because for some people, the commute is just part of the trade-off. And for others, it ends up being the deciding factor in whether this move actually makes sense for you. And then there's one more factor that's starting to matter more for buyers right now, and that's insurance. Because depending on the home and the specific area you're buying in, there is another cost that can affect your monthly payment more than you might expect. It's not always something that shows up right away when you're just browsing homes online, and a lot of buyers don't really think about it until they're already further along in the process. But it's definitely something you want to look into early on, so you have a clear understanding of your full financial picture. And when you really step back and look at everything together, your mortgage, your property tax, your utilities, your commute, and your insurance, that's what your true cost of living in Palmdale actually looks like. And when you look at it that way, Palmdale can still be a much more affordable option compared to Los Angeles, especially for buyers who are looking for more space, a different lifestyle, and a different pace. But the key is making sure that everything actually lines up for you. And it's with how you live day to day, because at the end of the day, saving money on the home price doesn't always mean you're saving money overall. It really comes down to how all of these factors come together for you personally. And if you're in that process right now and you're still trying to figure it out, if moving to Palmdale actually makes sense for your situation, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to walk you through everything, help you break down your numbers, and help you figure out what is the best move for you. And again, if you're looking at moving out here, I do videos every week breaking down what it actually is like living in Palmdale and the entire Antelope Valley, so you can really understand what to expect. And I'm actually curious, if you are thinking about moving out here, what's your biggest concern right now? Drop it in the comments, and I love to see what you're thinking about. And if you got family or friends considering making this move, this is probably something they should see before they make that decision. And don't forget to subscribe.